One sentence takeaways from yesterday that you'd like to share.
For me, it was the prayer time last evening. How God used Rochelle's prayer to open the door. I'm in pursuit of the Holy Spirit that you shepherded so well. I'll treasure it.
In our groups yesterday when we split up, it was refreshing to see that each one of us, doesn't matter what culture we're from, doesn't matter what part of the country we're from, we're all going through the same thing. And it was refreshing to see that we're not alone, like in our own little, like, we feel like we're in our own little bubbles. We forget there's a whole bigger world around us, and we're all going through the same exact thing, and we all desire unity with each other. And that was refreshing to hear. It made me feel like, okay, I'm not by myself on this.
Yeah. And to tag on that, also like the conversation of like, so what can we do? How can we work on this? How can we fix that? Just the being aware that there needs to be some type of strategy plan, trying to figure out how to make it better.
I think just having that atmosphere to release, like, I'm the type of person, like, before I say anything, I just ponder on it to make sure that what I'm thinking is right. So just even having that atmosphere to really release, like, this is what's really going on, back at home, in the ministry, in the local church, both good, the bad, the ugly, and then just being, oh yeah, I'm going through that too. Like, I'm like, really? Are you sure? So just the atmosphere being set for that, I think is good. We can just take a step back a little bit and surrender it all and then move back, energized and, ready to take on the world.
One major thing that it seemed like it just kept coming up throughout the day was just unity. Even like when we were talking about camps, it was having more of a unified vision as a denomination, as youth leaders. That is something that we are desiring. So that's really good.
I think for me, it's like Jesus really does make a huge difference in all this. And just seeing, I think I've met like 2 of you before. Well, obviously Travis, because we came together. And then John, I worked with him, and he came to our camp. Everyone else, well, Dr. Smith, you've been around too, so sorry. Three people. But having these types of conversations, like big heart-to-heart conversations after knowing each other for like 4 hours.
Yeah.
But also being able to goof around and go zip lining and be kids again, and seeing how Jesus can coordinate these types of things. It's just wild. Like who else can do that? So going back to the home area, it's like, oh man, okay, what's he doing here?
Sometimes you experience something that just feels right. It just feels like at a deep level in your soul, it just feels like appropriate, right? And I feel like being in a space where we're talking about how do we steward big decisions, how do we steward adolescents, how do we help be the kinds of advocates for students following Jesus that they need to be, it just feels right.
Yeah, I'll come off that too and just say, for me, it's just like, this is a breath of fresh air. It's good to be in the right place and be around the right people. And sometimes we wonder, what is God calling us? Is God really calling me to this? Am I really taking the right step? And man, I just got chills saying it. I just feel like I'm in the right place. So it's a breath of fresh air to be here. It's amazing.
And as a parent whose kids have been and will continue to be deeply affected by what you guys do, I'm so inspired and so thankful for the commitment that this group has given to this age group that's coming and the leaders that are being developed. And just, I'm inspired and in awe of the things that you guys are doing. So thanks for letting us be here.
Sorry guys, just playing such macros.
He's doing it.
Yeah, let him play,
He's all, he's all. Except the victories.
Yeah, we got a TV here, right? Put it up.
It's like we're not in a room full of you.
That's right.
That's right. John Jackson, like, you got 4.
You have a controller over there.
Eight.
Why is it not playing?
That's right.
Here's a real question. Does Wayne Schmidt know where Super Smash Brothers is?
You may find out today.
Well, as we transition into our colleges, universities, and seminary, I had a moment at just listening to you guys got me choked up because when I was talking to Ed last year, and we were just processing this role, I said to him, like, this is the kind of thing I could give my life to, right? Like what we're talking about, I'm willing to give my life to that. But it's gonna take a different approach in this next season. We need to build off of what Zach and Scott and others have built over the years. Just hearing you all share just reminded me of that conversation. This is worth giving our lives to. And Henry, you guys haven't met Henry, but Dennis mentioned him yesterday as he affectionately said he quit, but Henry retired after 40 years serving here at Victory Mount Camp. Started by cutting the grass as a story of him cutting the grass with 3 wheels. One of the wheels on the lawnmower was missing. He was just cutting the grass. And to think about that kind of commitment, and as they honored him at our district conference, my eyes just welled up, my heart got full because it reminds me we're building off of that kind of commitment. People who love students, who want to see them come, who want to see them disciple, who want to see them unleashed to be a kingdom force. We want to see them be that Acts 1-8 type of person, because we're an Acts 1-8 type of district denomination. So I'm glad you're here. We will keep this kind of thing going, and we'll talk at the end about what that looks like. So in transitioning us, I want to welcome our universities and seminary, and at least one of our DSs who's also on the call, who's going to share a little bit about something he's doing related to calling and leadership a little bit later. But as I mentioned to you all, this morning is really about having a conversation. And whenever I stepped into this role, early on, a common theme was the question of what do we do with the decisions that are being made at camps? What do we do with the decisions that are being made at universities, during chapels? What do we do with the decisions that are being made at conferences like Follow? And is there anything comprehensive that we're doing together that whether I'm in California, whether I'm in Florida, whether I'm in New York, whether I'm in North Carolina, there's a common thread of how we're navigating decisions and connecting people to mentors and people pursuing their calling in the context of community. And so what I wanted to do was to assemble some of our universities because many of them are doing some extraordinary work. And most of what I'm hearing is that many people are not aware always of what is happening. And so I think all of our universities will be represented today in our conversation at some point. And so I want to start with Houghton, because I know you all have to run to chapel in a few minutes. JL and Michael are on the call. And so I was up there, a month ago with Houghton as a part of their chapel and some classes and courses. They have something called Rooted that I got a chance to participate in. It's about 3 days. So Michael and Jay, I want you to introduce yourselves and kind of take it from there in terms of what you guys are doing related to calling, and then we'll go to our next university.
Hi, friends. My name is J.L. Miller. My colleague Mike Jordan is also here. I'm going to do a quick introduction of myself and a broad overview, and then Mike will introduce himself and do a little bit more specifics. I do see some familiar faces as the meeting owl bounces around the room, but for people who don't know me, after 11 years serving as a youth pastor in a local church, I came to Houghton to work in higher ed. I've done a few different roles. I did res life, student development, but right now, Mike and I are kind of a two-headed monster. Half of my job is chair of religion, and half of it is associate dean of the chapel. And Mike has half of his job as dean of the chapel, and then he's half faculty. So Mike and I, half of my job, I'm Mike's boss, and half of Mike's job, he's my boss. So luckily we're good friends, because if we ever came to a logger jam on who's in charge of who gets vacation or whatever, we're stuck. I am zooming right now from Houghton, but I'm headed out this weekend for a family trip to Michigan. Mike's zooming in from Philly for a conference he's at. But let me just talk big picture. So at Houghton, two big picture things that we take seriously where it comes to helping understand vocation and call. One is not ministry specific, and one gets a little bit more ministry specific. The first one is our Office of Vocation and Calling integrates very specifically with our spiritual life office. So we have someone in our Office of Vocation and Calling. Her name is Rachel Wright. Rachel actually has a master's in higher ed, but also a master's from Asbury Seminary in leadership. And so she connects kind of faith and vocation really well. But Mike and I speak into some special events that she runs, like our Sophomore Leadership Conference, which is an annual event we do to help prepare our sophomores for understanding what it means to be serving the kingdom of God through their gifts. And also, we just received a NetView grant that's going to be talking about thriving after college. And Mike and I, through Spiritual Life, are helping prepare the curriculum for that course, meeting the needs of that grant. So a couple big picture things we integrate is we always see our Office of Vocation and Calling tied with Spiritual Life. A little bit more specific when it comes to ministry training is Houghton runs its own version of what is called the Kern Ministry program, which Eddie Shigley I see on the call, and Eddie is kind of the godfather of the Kern program within our denomination. I've been running this program for a number of years, but what it is a non-academic but co-curricular mentorship experience where I oversee a cohort of anywhere from 8 to 12 Houghton students who are pursuing ministry or have a sense of a call to ministry. And we meet a couple times a month at my house. We have meals together. We discuss ministry stuff. We pray together. We bring in outside guests to speak about women in ministry, speak about church planting, speak about struggles in ministry, the mission field, whatever it may be. We take retreats. I connect them with mentors and spiritual directors. They get scholarships. So we do a lot of kind of intentional investment in, if you are experiencing a call to ministry, come alongside us and let us discipleship you through that process. Those are a couple of big picture things, but Mike's going to share a little bit after he introduces himself about a program that he and I invented specifically about vocation and calling through the Houghton experience.
Yeah, so my name is Mike Jordan. I know I've met a lot of you. I started my ministry life as an American Baptist pastor. Actually, I grew up as an American Baptist. If you know anything about the ABC, a pretty wide-ranging denomination. So I was always kind of Arminian, Wesleyan inflected. And so when my wife Jill was offered a job teaching at Houghton, she's a math professor, I gladly joined the Wesleyan Church at that point. So that was a great move for me. And have really enjoyed my years in ministry at Houghton. I'm in my 11th year in my role as dean of the chapel, and JL and I have really developed a great working relationship together and a great friendship. So he referenced this program that we designed together around vocation and calling. JL, I think we started like advocating for this not long after I began, like in 2013. It took the college a while to sort of catch on that this was a really good thing. So I think we started in 2017 with a program called Emmanuel Scholars, which I've described as like if if spiritual life at Houghton is coffee, Emmanuel Scholars is espresso. It's kind of a deep dive into a really intentional year of kind of discipleships. We call it spiritual formation oriented toward vocation. Like we wanted a program that was aimed at early college, be it freshmen or sophomores. So we kind of looked at various options for that. Would this sort of sit alongside our honors programs? Decided for a variety of reasons that it fit better as a sophomore year program. And one of those reasons is that sophomore year is kind of a really pivotal year in some ways where students, the novelty of the freshman year has worn off and all the energy, we're in this new place, we're so excited. And then it begins to get real. Like, why am I here and what am I going to do when I go? What is this whole experience about? And so the Emmanuel Scholars Program is a year-long thing. And I'll share with you some of the components of it, but basically it's built around the idea that God has called us each to be a certain kind of person. We use the language of name, that God gives each of us a name, and that name inflects the choices that we get to make in our lives. Like when I think about who God has called me to be, when I get a chance to say yes or no to something, if I get offered a job or if I get the chance to move someplace new, I want to think about who God has made me to be. And that name, that calling is the primary criterion in saying yes or saying no. But there are lots of things in our lives that we have to do that we don't get to choose. And so knowing my name also really helps me with that. So just by way of example, I've always talked about my name as bridge builder, that God has called me to be a bridge builder. And so because of that, when I get a chance, like when I was offered a job as dean of the chapel at a Christian college, I thought, yeah, this is a chance to build bridges. I want to do this. This is what God's made me to do. But it also means, like, when I'm thinking about my parenting style or how I'm a husband or how I'm a church member or a leader in other ways, bridge building is my best way of doing that. So we want to share that with students so that they begin to see, like, there's nothing about you personally that God sort of can't use. So rather than just thinking like, what am I going to do? Who am I going to be? Who has God made me to be is really crucial. So the components to the program, first, the main thing is that we meet every week for book discussion, and we read a wide range of books. I know it's kind of leaning into Houghton's reputation in the Wesleyan Church as being kind of a bookish place, but we want to do that. Like, we want to kind of dig into things, and some of these books really relate to vocation directly, but others of them are about kind of the big issues that the church is facing. And we kind of built this around the idea that one of the reasons that people don't do what God has made them to do is because they're really afraid. Like, they look at a world that can't talk about race, can't talk about gender, can't talk about a lot of hard things. And because they can't talk about it, they just sort of don't do it. They're afraid really to discover who God has made them to be, and to find their voice in the middle of those things. So we want to teach them, like, you can talk about this. It's going to be okay. So a big carrot of the program is that we buy all the books. Like, it's funded by the college so that students leave with a library of, in a given year, between maybe 10 and 15 books that they can have. I'm actually going to go ahead and throw in the chat, for those of you that are online, a copy of the book list from this year. And Santis, if you can make sure that the people who are there on site can get them, then oh, hang on one second. Well, I'll put it in the chat before I head out. It says I can't use it because the file's open right now, so I don't want to mess with it, but I'll put it in the chat before I head out. So that's the main component of the program. As we gather together, it's a group of between 8 and 16 kids on a given year. One year it blew up and we had about 30 kids, and that was complicated, but usually it's kind of a small group like that, and it's great for book discussion. We really want the students we tell them, don't get bogged down in minutia. We're going to ask you to read a lot of big things. Don't worry about footnotes. Just imagine that the author were here, and could you have a talk with them about what they've written? And so we try to model that in the way we lead it. We have dinner together as well. So we thought at the beginning about, could we make this into a residential program? Maybe someday it morphs into that. Right now it's not, in part because, of course, it's complicated to have a co-ed residential program. So we'll see where that goes in the future. But we do have dinner together because we want to just kind of hang out, get to know each other, meet as well. So we also retreat together to begin and end the year. We do 2-night retreats at local retreat centers, Catholic places so far most of the time, not always. But we really want students to see like an intentional community where people integrate their life's work and their faith and a worshiping life so that their whole identity kind of revolves around being the people God has made them to be. And as a natural expression of that, doing the things God made them to do. So we build those both year end. At the beginning of the year, we build it around Henry Nouwen's book, Life of the Beloved, to kind of root students in their identity as God's beloved children. The year end, we build around Nouwen's book, Reaching Out. And so that's kind of a natural, like, who has God made me to be? And what's he made me to do? There's also in the program weekly mentoring. So we work with a spiritual director here in town whose name is Jeannie Little. Some of you may know Jeannie and Don Little. Don and I guess they're both missionaries in residence. They were missionaries in Morocco for a lot of years. And Jeannie is certified as a spiritual director and is kind of a grandmotherly sort for our kids. And mostly they leave the program just raving about a grandmother type who has time to listen to them and really step into that, you know, for her, sometimes she's stepping into really awkward spaces with them. Like she talked to me about how hard it is sometimes for her to go with students to where they're going right now. But she goes there fearlessly and really with great grace and helps them kind of sort out what's God doing in your life and how can you listen for him better. Last thing is that at that ending retreat, we have students go around and share their sense of their name right now. Again, a word or a short phrase that just for them sums up like who God has made them to be. And we really try to make that a really affirming time. Like some students want to do that, they're ready to share, and some students are terrified of that because they don't want to do that kind of revealing of who they are. It feels scary to do. But we encourage them as they share their name to also talk about like 2 or 3 ways that they could put that into practice in the next couple years in a supportive place like Houghton, right? Like if you think, God's called me to be truth teller, for instance, whatever, then what are some ways that you could do that here and now? Because if you try that at Houghton and fail, no big deal. Like we can pick you up. Like that's part of being at a place like at a healthy Christian college, right? Like you can try and fail and not everything depends on you. And so and sometimes in the course of sharing their names, like other students are like, oh, you should really try this thing. You know, you should be a chaplain on your sports team, for instance, or that, you know, something might occur to another student who's hearing this that they haven't really heard or thought of before. So that's a bit about the program that we've devised. It's I don't know, it's one of the things I'm most excited about in ministry here. And it's a really, really good chance for students who want to go deep and discover who God has made them to be to do that. JL, would you say it's maybe a quarter to a third ministry students? I mean, the last couple years have been really low with ministry students. The first year we had maybe half and half. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, one thing I was going to say that that it turns out to be an advantage as we're experiencing, but wasn't by design, is it is about a quarter, a third students pursuing ministry, but the rest come from all over our campus. Pre-med types, computer programming, engineering, math types, art, humanities, English, writing, environmental studies. And so it's really a rich conversation, and it allows the people heading into ministry to have really complicated conversations with those who are going to be serving different places in the marketplace.
Yep.
And it allows those serving in the marketplace to hear the hearts of those in ministry. And so it's actually been pretty beautiful to see this. We send an all-campus email every year to invite people to apply, and the Lord just brings to us these groups of really diverse students looking at all sorts of different ways of life, of how they will serve the Lord afterwards. But it isn't exclusively ministry type. So we chewed your ears off with a lot of info. Mike did add the file. I don't know, Santis, if you have questions that you want to bounce to us for clarification or not. It's muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so we're gonna take 3 to 5 minutes. Questions for Mike and JL related to calling initiatives at home. Any questions from the group? And that could be people online or people in the room. So any questions you may have for JL and Mike? question I had is, it sounds like most of what you described is for like currently enrolled students. Are there any offerings for people who are not Houghton students?
No, that's a good question. I don't think of Houghton as doing significant vocation stuff for folks outside. JL, any thoughts on that? I don't think of a program that.
No, we don't have anything. Mike and I actually worked on a proposal where we would take our Emmanuel scholars and have them organize and host a retreat for high school juniors or seniors. The problem is the proposal was being crafted right before COVID, and things got very complicated about having anybody on campus. And since then, we've been doing a little bit of our kind of post-COVID rebuilding and rebuilding the momentum. The program is still very strong, but that's a good reminder that we could probably dust off that proposal and see what it looks like. But that got kind of T-boned with the timing of COVID. But right now, no particular initiatives focused on this area for high school age students.
Any other questions? Well, JL, Mike, thank you so much for being with us. I know you have to hop off at some point during our time, so thank you for the sacrifice, and thank you for what you're doing for students and for our movement. We appreciate you all. We're going to move to Oakwood and to Ben Rotz, who's with us. Ben, why don't you introduce yourself, share what's going on at Oakwood.
Santees, my friend, always good to see you, and the rest of you. Just want to say good morning from beautiful sunny Oklahoma this morning. First of all, again, I'm looking around the room, I recognize a few faces. I just want to start by saying thank you for the investment you're making in this generation. Our heart at Oakwood is to partner with you and to kind of work alongside of you to create a pipeline for you. I'm going to keep ours fairly simple this morning, just as far as what we do. And Santees had mentioned maybe some things we'd like to do. And maybe explore that with you for a little bit this morning. So for us at Oakwood and this whole conversation about calling and what that means, one of our first priorities is we want to host, right? So my friend Ariana is on the call today from NTS. We've hosted NTS camp on campus for several years. We've hosted another camp. So Oakwood would really like to be a part of those conversations and hosting events on campus, whether those are camps or summer weekends or retreats. And so even for you all, if you are interested in doing that during the summer and bringing a group to campus and maybe getting some of our faculty involved in that to help explore that, let me know. And we would be happy to kind of play host. So that's the first thing for us is we want to host, right? We want to be a hospitable place where as students are exploring the call or, if they have a camp experience here, that we are able to come alongside in that conversation. The second thing I would say is we want to help students discover. So for us here, all of our students, but our ministry students as well, we are a very strengths-heavy university. And what I mean by that is if you're familiar with StrengthsFinder at all, the assessment, we require students to take that. And a lot of those conversations for us, we assume that students know that they're called. Strengths gives us the language for how they're called, right? So it gives us language for helping them to understand, are they more gifted in the executing and making things happen, or the relationship skills, or some of those. And so it really is a discovery process of helping them to understand how they're gifted and wired to serve and lead in ministry. We also do interviews here on campus. So as students move through our academic programs here, they go through an interview process with our faculty to make sure that we're talking about things that are more about ministry. We have referrals here for therapy, right? So if a student is dealing with something that could potentially trip them up in ministry, we want to make sure that we offer resources to them and referring to them to professional counseling. And then, of course, one of the biggest things is we want them to be involved in the local church, right? So even though this is the academic side of things, there is no substitute for working in a local church. And so it's a requirement for all of our ministry majors to serve, volunteer in a local church throughout the school year and do an internship as well. The third thing I would say is we host, we discover, we want to develop. So we bring leaders in all the time, right? In fact, I think a couple of you, I see Zach out there, will be on campus in early November. We've got a residency fair coming up. And so we try to really kind of have this place be a place where local church leaders can come in, right? And invest in our students and those who are exploring a call to ministry, maybe even if they're not even a ministry major, can have conversations with those who are really thriving in local church leadership to just be that ongoing presence for students who are who feel called or maybe have a sense of God's calling on their life. And along with development, it's financial planning. We know that for most, I don't know if there's any millionaires in the room today besides Santees, but it's just not a career that you go into that's lucrative, right? And so we want to help provide these students with just like, hey, this is what loans are. This is how much it's going to be when you get out of school. How can we help you create a budget? That's just more of those kind of practical skills for them that, again, we want to remove as many obstacles as possible. When you think about people get tripped up in ministry, right? We want to try to create awareness and resources for as much of those issues or as many of those issues as we possibly can during the time here. So host, discover, develop, and then the last one for me is deploy. Like, so at the end of the day, we're a sending university, just like we're a sending denomination. And so we want to help our students who feel called to ministry. How do you build a resume? How do you navigate the interview process? How do you look for a job, right? How can we help you network? And then resource them on the back end, even after they've graduated, to make sure that we're doing our part just to help them thrive in leadership and ministry. So that's kind of what we do in a nutshell. What we'd love to do down the road, we'd love to work with you all to create like a bridge program during the summer. And for that means like maybe it's bringing students in for a long weekend here where we do strengths assessments with them and we help explore like I may be called to ministry, right? I'm not sure, or I definitely am. And we'd love to kind of host some of those summer events. We'd love to help find ways to resource students, even financially on the back end, whether that's through a denominational loan grant, just to help kind of support them and help them with the burden of the financial responsibility. So those are some things that we're working on long-term here. But again, grateful to be a part of the conversation and grateful to you all for what you're doing. And if there's anything that Oklahoma Wesleyan or I could do, count us in. We'd love to do that.
All right. Well, thank you, Ben. It's always been having you, man. It's a joy to see you leading at Oakwood and beyond. So thanks for your sacrifices for being on the call. I'm gonna transition and kind of break up the conversation a little bit and move outside of one of our universities and talk with Ariana about NTS. And so NTS is hosted by, I think, every one of our colleges except Hope and Kingswood. And so Smooth, Oakwood, and Kingswood is only Kingswood. Kingswood is only. Matter of fact, my first college I ever went to that was Wesleyan was Houghton, and it was NTS. Troy Evans was the speaker that year. It was a pretty wild thing. They told me New York, but I thought it was New York City. And I was surprised when I didn't see any buildings. But Ariana, welcome. Thank you for being on the call. I know you and Kyle and Jeff and Olivia are doing some incredible work around calling. Had a chance to be at, I think, 4 NTSs this summer, and was a part of 2 of the Thursday night or the 4th night sessions where you all had an invitation to a call. So why don't you share what NTS is doing? I think everybody knows what NTS is around the table, is correct? Anybody not know? Okay, why don't you describe, there are a few people who don't know what NTS is. So describe what NTS is first, and then what you all do as it relates to calling.
Yes, all right, thank you. And thank you for this invitation. Thank you, Santees, for your heart to do this and to put this together. We're grateful to work together in the kingdom this way. And yeah, my name is Ariana Eckert. My husband, Jeff, and I served a local church youth ministry for many years. And the church that we went to in Kentwood, Michigan, we had too many kids to go to our district camp. So camp was such an informative time for Jeff and I both. He got saved at camp and I got called to ministry at camp. And so we're like, our kids have to go to camp. So we called a friend that we knew did their own camp because they were also a large church. And that first year, a couple other friends that were doing their own came together. And that's just kind of how NTS camp started. So that was over 20 years ago. And it was just a bunch of youth pastor friends that that were doing their own thing that said, let's just put our resources together and do this. And it just eventually grew to 5 to 6 weeks of camp. And again, we just kind of go where people ask us to go. We haven't really ever gone out and tried to make camps places, but we have felt this mandate from God to reach this generation. And that's what I love too about being around this table here, is our heart for what God is doing this generation and the needs and what is different now than what it used to be, and the informative years of what students, middle school and high school students are, and their hunger and their desire to seek God for what's next in their life. And as we meet together year after year, I just am blown away at all that God is doing. And we see the heartbreak and we see the needs for sure, but we also see a generation ready to stand up and to serve and to go. And several years ago, we just felt like God had given us a mandate that we would talk about call to ministry, and we were kind of sporadic about when we offered students to actually hear from God in that point. But it's been several years that we felt like we've got to be intentional about this. And what we've seen, and I don't know how much you've talked about, sorry, we haven't been able to be a part of it like I hoped, but we've seen a lack of youth pastors out there. We've seen a lack of pastors. And we're asked all the time, do you know anybody that can come here, anybody there? And I grew up in the 80s was my prime years for youth ministry, and just felt like it was booming. And when we graduated in the early 90s, some of our friends didn't even get jobs. There weren't even enough jobs for people that were looking to be in ministry. So we see this shift here. So we kind of felt this mandate of, you got these students here, you've got them in a place where they see what youth ministry is, and you see what their callings can be. Go ahead and just throw it out there and let me do the work. We feel like God has said, let him work on hearts. So we specifically take a night each week of our camps as a call to ministry night, and we don't put down marketplace ministry. We really elevate that. As Christians, we're all called. But there is a calling in ministry that is a full-time vocational leader of leaders in that way. So we do that. We ask them to actually stand up. We ask them to go to a certain place in the chapel usually. And then after everyone else is dismissed, we kind of sit and stay with them, and we gather their information of who's been called and what they feel like they've been called at that moment, if they haven't, and really just speak into that, pray over them, anoint them. We ask that, look now to see what your ministry is. If you feel like God has called you into youth ministry, then you serve in your youth group when you get back home. If you feel called to children's ministry, you go back home and you serve in your children's ministry. And this calling, when God stirs it in your heart, no matter middle school or high school, it doesn't have to wait until you graduate and get out of high school to start doing something. Start now, learning your trade, learning what God is doing in you, and watching to see where his passions are placed inside of you and what you need to do. So we have heavily, our camps, our churches come, they bring their youth groups and their adult leaders. So we've heavily just kind of given the information back to the pastors of the churches. We've let them really do the follow-up, and we train our adult leaders throughout the week as well, so that they can go home and love on their kids well, and disciple them and help them to grow. But we just did hire somebody on this year, actually, that is going to kind of come alongside of our pastors and do just a little bit more at that calling. One benefit of being in our colleges are, we understand that when God gives you a spiritual moment. When you've had a spiritual moment with God, you remember the time, you remember the place, you remember all those places. And we want that to be an on-ramp into our Christian colleges and understanding that this is a place of familiarity. This is a place where God has spoken to you. And we have college kids that travel with us throughout the summer. And my favorite is a couple times we've had a kid come and say, come here, right here in this chapel. This is where I was sitting when God called me to ministry. And it's just an honor to be able to partner with our colleges in that way.
For her and for NTS, one question I'll start with, and others can jump in. Like when you think about, I think, are there 5 or 6 NTSs happening now this summer? I want to say 6, but there are 2 at IU, and then 4 others. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
And when you, like, how much of the attendance is Wesleyan churches? How much is non-Wesleyan?
I would say probably 60 to 80% are Wesleyan churches. I'm sorry, I don't know that. We do have several other denominations. Our heavy attendance is Wesleyan churches. Yeah.
And when you, like, I was blown away this year. I just want to make sure others are aware. This summer was one of the record numbers attended in at least 2 of the universities. Like, what were the numbers like of attendees, and what were the numbers like of people who responded to the call?
So we had a little over 3,600 in attendance, and we captured 400 names of people called to ministry, but we counted 500 that raised their hands that night. So there's always that little gap there, but we were, able to be in front of that many students, hundreds of students, to just pour into them for those few moments and to send them back and to capture their information, ready to follow up with them. And we've already sent out 1 letter to all of them, and hopefully, as we continue to develop what our new staff person is doing, we'll really be able to connect more. We have dreams, we have hopes, we have ideas. But again, what our heart is we want to fill every pulpit. We want students to hear the call from God. We want students to see that the call to ministry is the highest call that you can get, and to do it for a lifetime, and to stay in it, and to watch God grow your ministries. And Jeff and I have been in youth ministry full time for 30 years. We do a couple other things as well right now, but man, our heart is for this generation, and seeing them see the joy and the fulfillment of doing what God has called you to do, and to shepherd people, and to lead people to the Lord, and to then again influence others to follow along, and influence others to hear their call and answer their call.
Follow up on that question, Ariana. For sure, the example of leader ministry, your daughter is another example. How many of those responding would you estimate are female?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that. There's a little echo. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, Pastor Wayne was asking how many of the students who respond to the call are female?
Are female. We actually have a higher female group than we do male. I would say it's probably, as we looked at each camp, it was almost probably 2 to 1 female over male.
So what is your follow-up? Once you get those cards that they hand in, what's the next step that NTS takes?
So for us, we've actually written them a hand letter. We've mailed it out to them. We've been calling the youth pastors and asking, what their follow-up has been and how can we come alongside them at this point. We have, again, like I said in the past, we've heavily given that to the youth pastor, and at the end of at camp, we give them a little commitment card, and it asks them all their kind of decisions that they make, and the youth pastor takes that home with them, because sometimes at camp, things get crazy and small groups happen that every youth pastor can't be at. So we want to make sure that they have in their hand the things that all of their students have experienced that week so that they can follow up with them. But we, yeah, at this point, that's been our first couple of steps. You know, we have hopes and dreams of, you know, maybe conferences or things like that to pour into these students more. But again, our hope is to ask them to think about later the kind of colleges that they want to go to and what the Wesleyan Church offers.
Excellent. Any other questions? NTS?
So we have some good dialogue taking place. By the way, Zach from South Dakota. My question is, we have a lot of great universities that are surrounding this too. Is there any partnerships of getting that information out to the programs that are being listed in each of those universities?
Well, we are in the early stages of those kind of conversations as well, for sure. Yeah, the colleges that we're at, they get a list of all of our students, and they are able to send them information about their college and to promote themselves in that way. They all have stage time that we give them at NTS camp, the campuses that we're at, and then also the colleges that travel along with us are able to be up in front of people, and we have breakout sessions where we have actually our college kids that facilitate those in a lot of places. So we're asking them to build those relationships and have those conversations.
Yeah, I think the more that we partner with our RE5 schools and the resources that the colleges have that even the local church doesn't have, and being able to push into the colleges, that would be game-changing.
Yeah.
So I was just curious if those names and those lists do get transferred or at least notified by the school to say, hey, maybe they're a fit in your region, and the specific programs that the people even on this call could help assist and just defining their calling more.
Yeah.
Mariana, can you briefly, NTS has grown to become, have many arms. Can you briefly share what the other arms of NTS are for some people who are in the room that may not know?
Yeah, so it's nice to see Pastor Wayne there. I didn't know he was there. Can't see all the pictures there, but we were on staff under Pastor Wayne at Kentwood Community Church, and that's when the camp started with us and with College Wesleyan Church in Marion, Indiana, and then a few other churches, 5 different churches there that year. And several years into our ministry time at Kentwood Community Church, my husband Jeff and his friend, who was out in Colorado, actually started another thing called Claim Your Campus, which at that point was just rallying all of our youth group kids before school. And then we would go to the actual campus and we would walk around the school and we would stake these prayers in the ground, always a different way, but we would put them in all 4 corners of the schools, and we would say, God, we take responsibility from the north to the south, to the east, to the west, to be your hands and feet here, to show your love, to be your witnesses here this year. And we did that for a couple of years until one of our kids says, can we do this every week at our school? So we said, sure. So we began to do that, and not walking around the campus, but meeting inside. So we had a school that was closest to our church that had most of our constituency of students there. A group of 8 kids, we started to pray every week together, once a week at school. And one week Jeff said, you know, let's not pray some surfacey prayers. Like, look at your school and what do you want God to change at your school? So they said, fighting is a really bad thing here. Like, we would love to see God change that in our school. And this was at that time a place of 48 different countries of origin in that school, a very diverse school. So it was very, very intense for a lot of students as they went to school. So they just began to pray. And a couple weeks in, Jeff was sitting in the staff meeting, and Pastor Wayne had been at a board meeting and for the schools. And the next day in the staff, he said, you know what? Last night I went to a board meeting and this happened and this happened, this happened, and these statistics. And they said at the end of it, they said, and for some reason, we don't even know why, but we've had no fights. We've hardly have any fighting going on. And we haven't done any kind of rallies. We haven't done any kind of speakers coming in or anything. And in that moment, Jeff was like, I know why. 8 students have been praying about this, and it just stirs something in his heart that if God can change the culture of a school with these 8 students at this school, what can he do across the country? And it continued just to be something that we did with our students at our youth group. And then Jeff felt called to step away from being full-time on the staff there and to just really go with this and just see where God takes it, and an invitation to do that worldwide or nationwide. So we do Never the Same camps, we do Claim Your Campus, and then we also do soul exercises, which is a curriculum that in 4 years, students get the whole overlay of the entire Bible. We do that with students, and churches are doing that now as well. Our church actually is doing it. We've had a couple where we do it for adults and students and children. So the whole entire family is reading the exact same thing throughout the week. There's a couple verses each day to read, and then the message on Sunday is what they have been reading about. And their small group time after Sunday is just one more little thing. So just really heavily getting people in the Bible. Again, our heart is that we feel like there's a biblical literacy out there that breaks our hearts, and you hear people shouting things on social media and not on social media, things that don't have anything to do with what God's word says. So we want people to know God's word and to move forward and to be champions of that. We also do Enlighten Students, which was an event that our daughter did in high school for her high school, to have a praise and worship night at her high school. And from that night, somebody's like, can you help me do that at mine? And it has just turned into, I think 15,000 students over the last couple of years have attended an Enlightened Students. It's a student-led worship and praise night. So what we're doing with that, we're empowering students to go into your school and make bold statements by praying and worshiping and giving your testimony and always offering a call to salvation, and lives are being changed through that. And it's been very exciting.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us. I know there's a lot going on with your dad right now. And so we are praying for you, praying for your dad. So sacrifice to jump on. So thank you for doing that. We'll be praying for him. Remind me of your dad's name. So we'll lift this up.
Jerry Brett Kaiser.
Okay.
Thank you. Bless you guys. Thanks for all that you do, for sure.
Yeah, thank you. So we're gonna move to IWU, and we have Tyler and Eddie who are with us. And so I just encourage you guys to just jump in. I had a great meeting with them this week and have been blown away by some of the things that they're doing. So I'll have just open up and let you guys share as you're feeling led.
Great. Thanks, Santis, for inviting us. Really appreciate it, and appreciate the conversation that we had earlier this week. It was amazing. Wish I was with y'all down in North Carolina. Sounds like you guys are having a great time, some really good meetings, and I really always enjoy the fellowship and camaraderie and kindred spirits of youth pastors and the DYP. So I know you guys are probably having a great time down there. Wish I could be with you. There's a few things that you may not know that we're doing at Indiana Wesleyan for our pastoral ministry students. The first thing I just want to quickly talk about is the current program. And there's 4 core values that we have in the current program. The first one is that we deeply form them. And so we want to go challenge them to go deep with God and to foster that intimacy in their life with Jesus. If they're going to be a pastor, if they're going to be a minister or leader, they need to go deep with God. And so we do that in a variety of different ways, but we have a cohort meetings every week. And so we get to, my staff, my current staff, we get to meet with each cohort every week to dive into the spiritual formation. And then each of our current students have a mentor for 2 years as well. So that's one of them. Second one is that we want to make sure they're diligently trained. We believe that through this process, we can help them to go further faster, and that we can also help them to gain a lot of practical ministry skills. It's one thing to learn about ministry in the classroom. It's another thing to actually go do it. And so by the time our students graduate from the current program, they'll have right around 2,000 practical ministry hours in the local church, which is like crazy. It's outstanding just to think about that. The third thing is that we want to make it distinctly affordable. So if you're in the current program, you get some extra scholarship money. You finish your undergrad program in 3 years, you finish your MDiv in 2 years. That process normally takes 7 to 8 years. We do it in 5. And so you're saving a lot of money by doing that. And then we highly scholarship it so it can be distinctly affordable. The fourth core value is that we want to foster intentional community. This is not just a 5-year unique learning experience. We want this to be a 50-year venture together where they're locking arms with one another and they are doing ministry together and holding each other accountable to what is good and pure and holy and righteous. And when they go through tough times, they're able to kind of lean on those they were in college with, and they can cry with each other. They can rejoice with each other. And so we're already seeing that now that this is year 12 for us. This freshman class is cohort number 12, which is incredible. And when I think about cohort ones, they're now basically 30 years old. They still meet once a month on Zoom calls together to stay connected, to network, to support each other. And it's unbelievable. It's also unbelievable that they are now leaders in the Wesleyan Church at age 30. They're planting churches. They are senior pastors. They are high capacity ministry leaders. So it's really, really awesome to see that. One of the things that we do that I think that's unique, that in year 4, they start their master's degree here at IWU, and it's still a face-to-face context. And then in year 5, they do a pastoral residency. And so they are in one of your churches doing a residency, being mentored by you, and then they switch to online classes during year 5. So I want to just reach out to you all and say, please come to IWU and recruit our students. Please come and start a pastoral residency. We have partnerships with about 65, 70 churches, but we want to grow that to about 100 churches that we have partnerships with. And if you're interested, contact me. We've got kind of an information sheet on that of kind of a requirements of our pastoral residency in our partnership and in our network. So please do that. We love it. In fact, many of you already come. As I look around that room, many of you are here all the time. And so just really appreciate that you're doing that. And then our students need to have internships, summer internships. So if you have an internship program, come and recruit our students. We have a different church here every Monday, Tuesday, and every Wednesday, Thursday of every week of the entire school year. And so come and be a part of what we're doing and get to know our students and invest deeply in our students. We would love that. I feel like my calling right now is very crystal clear. I believe what God has called me to do is to mentor, train, and equip the next generation of pastors. It's that simple. That's what it is. 2 of my sons have gone through the current program. I believe in it so much that what we're doing in this is equipping them to be phenomenal pastors, that I said, Trey, Noah, you got to do this. And they did. And they have benefited from it. Olivia Eckert, Sophie Eckert, you got to do this. And they did. And 2 of them have gone through the program, or one of them still is in the program, I should say. So it's really cool to kind of invest deeply into your kids, which is amazing. And I just see that as a blessing and a privilege to do that. We have about 115 of our students are in the current program. And most of the time when I talk to you all, when I talk to your pastors about the current program, most of you respond by saying, my goodness, why didn't they do that when I was there? Like, that'd be amazing in 5 years if I could have graduate with an undergrad and an MDiv. That'd be insane. Instead, like myself, I had to labor through it. 4 years of masters. It took me that long. And then 4 years through a doctorate program. And it's just miserable. And it's after you're married and after you have kids. And it's just so hard to do that. And you're doing all these all-nighters again, because you have a full-time job and you're married and you got 7 kids. Well, you might not have 7 kids. I have 7 kids. And it was just really hard to do that. This way, we can just take them straight through. And it's just an absolutely amazing experience. The second thing you may not be aware of, that's the current program. So think about questions or write some questions down. And by the way, if you thought I was on my phone when other people were talking, it's because Stephen Tolan kept on texting me. So that's the reason why. So Stephen, it's your fault. The second thing that you may not know about is Examine Camp. And this is specifically for high school students that feel called to ministry, or they want to explore their call to ministry. And so they come to IWU for either a 1-week camp in June or a 2-week camp experience in July. And they get to explore the call to ministry, and they get to meet with other high school students and talk about their call to ministry. We have our current students as RAs in the dorm with them. And so there's 4 to 6 current students in the dorms as RAs. We have one of our profs teaching a class. So they take a 1-credit class in June, they take a 3-credit class in July, and yes, they can come to both June and July camps. The other thing that's really unique about this and just phenomenal is it's free. Yes, you heard it right. FREE, free. And so we just want to invest deeply in your high school students who feel called to ministry. So sign them up, get them here to IWU, and then we have seen that translate into about 95% of those students end up at IWU, and about 90% of those students end up in the current program. And it ends up being a phenomenal experience for both the student and the local church as we begin to invest deeply in them. And they go back to your church and they go, hey, can I do like an internship with you while I'm still in high school and learn more about ministry? Because I feel called to ministry. So we just want to come alongside you and help equip your students better for their call and ministry. The third thing you may not be aware of is what we are calling the Called Collective. And this is a ministry resource site for high school students who feel called to ministry. And when Charlie, myself, and a guy by the name of Jake Thurston, we kind of started this about 3-4 years ago. We got our heads together and we're like, when a high school student is called to ministry, I think one of the questions they ask is, okay, I got saved at camp on Monday night. I got called into ministry on Thursday night at NTS or one of your district camps, right? And now what do I do? Okay, what do I do now? And so the Called Collective is this resource site for high school students to answer that question, what do I do now? And so I'd like Tyler to kind of share some of the things about the Called Collective, because the resources on this site is absolutely phenomenal for high school students. And when we designed this, our design and thought was we want more for these students than from these students. And so if they end up at Indiana Wesleyan, great. If they end up at Houghton, great. If they end up at SWU, great. If they end up at Oakwood, great. I mean, those are all Kingswood, great. These are all phenomenal places to go and kind of fulfill their call and to get educated. We just don't want them ending up, like at Taylor or Asbury or, Wheaton or I'm joking, not really. But we really want more for them than from them. And we want to kind of really step alongside you and be in this process of equipping them and helping them fulfill this call and answer that question. I'm called to ministry. Now what do I do? Tyler, tell them a little bit about the Call Collective and some of the resources on that side and on that site.
Yeah. When I first came into this position to replace Jake, the Called Collective was really a space where we could share articles and where we could share videos that help develop students in ministry skills. And when I came in, I felt very strongly that there needed to be a social component to the Called Collective. So what we've done is we've designed this social network. There's an app, there's a website that students can log on to, they can sign up for, and they can communicate with other high school students called into ministry all around the nation, all around the world. And they can pray for one another, they can encourage one another, share testimony, they can learn alongside one another with all of the content that we have on the Called Collective. So some of the content we have on the Called Collective is we have a pretty extensive podcast network. So we have 5 different weekly podcast shows that we develop. Some of them include Good Days with Charlie and Eddie, which is one of my favorite shows, just, personally. But then we have another
say that. Thank
great
you, Tyler. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. So we have another podcast called Fresh Text that actually joined our network. It's been a podcast that Dr. John Drury has done for many years. He has a lot of episodes on it. He's come under our network and we're producing that podcast for him. And it's been a pleasure to have John in our network. We have another podcast called Coffee and Calling, where high school students, professors, pastors, either old or young, share their call to ministry story. And actually, Dr. Shigley's in our podcast studio right now. That is our setup that we have for all of our podcasts. It was a dream to get that, and we've managed to fulfill the dream. So we also have another podcast called The Defining Yes, which is all about women in ministry. Different women pastors come and share their challenges in ministry, their victories in ministry, their advice to other women who are called into ministry. So all of those are podcast shows that we create, develop, we produce all of that, and we release it out into the world on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and really anywhere you can find podcasts. That is our biggest source of content at the moment. Another way we produce content is something called a track. And what a track is, it's basically a course or a longer form of written content that students can go through, learn a ministry skill, learn different aspects of what it means to be in ministry, what it means to be a leader, what it means to be a pastor, and what in the world is a call, and what is my next step, and what does that timeline actually look like. And some of the tracks we have on the Called Collective right now, we have a spiritual disciplines track that one of our grad students wrote, where there's 12 different spiritual disciplines that students can learn about, but then live it out. And we give very practical, hands-on ways to practice those spiritual disciplines. Another track is True North from Dave Smith, which I'm sure most of you know Dave Smith and love Dave Smith, or had Dave Smith. He has brought his True North curriculum in a digital form onto the Called Collective, and students can walk through and learn that IBS type process. And yeah, there's plenty of other tracks, but those are the big two that we have right now. We have the other one that's on calling and what is calling, and the timeline of what our next steps are. And then every week we're trying to produce an article that kind of doesn't fit into either one of those categories to fill in the gaps of learning and knowledge for these students. And then we're also restarting our video uploads on YouTube, where we teach different skills for preaching, for praying in public, for reading scripture, all of those different kind of things. So our main goal is to create a space where students from all across the nation. When I was called into ministry, I had the privilege of having a dad who was pastor, and I had the privilege of having a youth pastor who was very involved with me. Not everybody called into ministry in this age has that privilege of having somebody alongside them to know where the landmines are, to know where the hurdles are, to know where to go, who to talk to, and things like that. I mean, the Wesleyan world for a long time has been, you got to know people to go anywhere. You got to know people to know the different processes. We want to help try to solve some of that by laying before people, these students, the timeline, the way they need to go, but then also surround them with a community of other students their same age that are in this same phase of life, that they can grow together and learn together. We've developed a few partnerships, one of them being with Kyle Williamson from Enlightened Students from Claim Your Campus. We've had some communication back and forth, and we're going to start sharing resources back and forth to post on each other's sites and things to help promote each other and things like that. And I'm just really excited that the Called Collective, my hope is that the Called Collective grows and it becomes something where it's the default, it's the de facto. If I'm called to ministry, what's my next step? My next step is to join this, because from that, all of the rest of my timeline is kind of set and I don't have to worry about it as much. And that students from all across the nation wouldn't be siloed or alone wherever they're at. So that is the Called Collective, nuts and bolts in a nutshell. That's what we do.
Thanks, Tyler, man. Appreciate it. That's amazing. And when you come visit Iowa, we'd love to have you on the Good Days podcast with myself and Charlie. So make sure you let us know when you're coming. Y'all got any questions? How can we help you?
The actual website for the Called Collective.
Can you tell the Call Collective website address?
Yeah, so I can put it in the chat, but it is thecalledcollective.org.
So a question about
your high school program for the 1 week in June and 2 weeks in July. What is the name of that program?
Great question. It's called Examine Camp. We can put the link to Examine Camp in the also in the chat. We can also put the link to the current program website. We'll put that as well in the chat so you guys can see that.
One of the things you said this week that really spoke to me, I want to kind of put it out here today. I think it's the heartbeat of every one of our universities, but I want to name it from our conversation. You said, I will pay you, but the call collective is not just for IWU, and that it is for the kingdom, it's for the body. And the more we talk, the more that became abundantly clear, that this resource, even though it's resourced by IWU, it's not just for IWU. And that's a real blessing to know that you're open to that flexibility of others being a part of it, figuring out ways to collaborate with you. If you haven't seen the website, it is loaded with resources, So any other questions for Tyler or any?
Are those paid resources or are they free?
Completely
It's absolutely free.
That's the best price.
That's pretty. So we're going to talk more about their platform, which is on Mighty Networks, and some of the things that are on the platform a little bit later in this session and in the next session. But thank you, Eddie. Thank you, Tyler, for your time. So grateful to have you all partnering with us on this. I want to go back to Ariana. She had something she wanted to mention that she forgot to share with you guys. So I just want to give some space for her to share as well.
I'm sorry, I wasn't ready to talk about the rest of the things that we do for our ministry. So the Claim Your Campus is for student-led prayer at their school. And we do have an app that we're always loving to just kind of get out there and share for your students that they would go to the app, Claim Your Campus, and it teaches them how to lead a prayer group without them knowing that it's teaching them how to lead a prayer group. Gives them verses to read and tells them what to pray for that day. And there's a prayer focus that everyone across the country is praying at the same time. So claimyourcampus.com for younger students that don't have a phone. There's just a way that they can print out something and look at a way to lead that. And then the app is Claim Your Campus app. So just want to throw that out there again, another way to get students feeling like they're owning their ministry opportunities at their schools. We tell students that your school is the biggest mission field some of you may ever have. This is where you go in and you work every day doing what God wants you to do through there. So that's another way that we're kind of encouraging students in ministry.
Thank you. Such a great resource. I remember when you first launched it and man, just the traction that it gained early on. What a blessing. What a blessing. I know it took a lot to create that app too. But
yeah, we've done a couple. Before COVID, we had 50,000 users before COVID hit. And then when all the schools went down, and then we went through another year where students were allowed to meet in classrooms. So we're at a rebuilding stage, but we're already back and 40 through different states. So yeah, we'd love our Wesleyan friends to know about that for sure.
Thank you. So hey, those in the room to give space for your bodies to be refreshed and for your minds to be refreshed. We're gonna take a 5-minute break. So feel free to go refresh yourselves. And we'll come back at 10:40. We'll come back at 10:40 and we'll do SWU, Wesley Seminary, and Tim Kirkpatrick is gonna share a little bit about what our mission is. So 5 minutes, 10:40, we'll be right back here. Yeah. All right. Let's get everybody over. There are a few more snacks to put out with fruit. Help you keep your mind focused. All right. So, wanted to transition us. You all know these pastors are rowdy bunch. So I'm extremely grateful. Can y'all hear me out there? Am I muted or can you? No.
We're going to clap, take your
It looks like we do. The question is, you can hear me, give me a thumbs up.
Can y'all hear us? Thumbs up?
Okay, good.
All right, so wanted to create some space. Tim Kirkpatrick is someone I deeply respect. I had a chance to do some work with him before he became the DS at Shenandoah, and just his vision, his heart for students, his heart for leadership development, leadership pipeline, however you want to frame that. And he has chosen to do something in his district, which I think could be potentially a model for other districts. Potentially, it may not fit everyone, but it might be something for people to consider as it relates to what do you do with a core group of students who have promise that you really want to pour into. So why don't you share what you've started in Shenandoah, and I'd love for people to hear about that.
Yeah, thanks so much. I wish I was there with everybody to see some old friends and meet some new ones. And Victory Mountain is definitely a special place. Two things probably heading into it, just kind of set the stage of value system. One, born and raised in the Wesleyan Church, love the Wesleyan Church deeply, so much that I left for 15 years. Part of the reason why I left is because there weren't anybody accepting me into their programs, like not even to intern. And so I would say not one of the best and the brightest coming out of Indiana Wesleyan, but still the Wesleyan Church. I wouldn't be here without families at Trinity Wesleyan Church in Indianapolis. They really helped me out a ton, and a lot of saints that we stand on their shoulders. And so there's a deep desire and love for the Wesleyan Church, but not just for the past, but to really see it move forward and grow without losing its roots and its identity and its values. And I believe deeply in that. And part of that is, I think, why I'm in the position I'm in. The second thing is they say proximity, I'm going to close my door, proximity changes perspective. And we've got two girls that just turned 14 this summer. And so youth ministry, next gen ministry was not something that I was overly concerned about until about 8 months ago. And it's, you know, every day I'm thinking about student ministries and next gen and even connecting the dots. And so it's been really encouraging to me to hear the different people explaining different things. Like I'm taking furious notes on what to do. So leading into this position, I've been in the Shenandoah district as the district superintendent this just one full year. And surveying the land, we do not have much going on in way of a strategic next gen or student ministry. What we have is people going to NTS camp, and we love that because they do such a great job. Tony Chavon is one of my best friends and is just a huge advocate for NTS. But there hasn't been a comprehensive strategy plan, anything leading up to it or coming out of it. So it's just NTS in July, and that's it. And we don't have a lot of youth pastors. We don't have a lot of even children's workers, to be honest with you, that are even full-time. We have some part-time stuff. And so one of the things as I've gone around and talked to different pastors in one-on-one or large group settings, I've just posed the question, how many of you, raise your hand, how many of you were connected to the Wesleyan Church via a youth group or a youth camp. And it's over 80% in every room that I'm in. Now, the majority of our focus as a district has been adult ministry, marketplace multipliers, things like that, which is phenomenal. We need that. But there has been almost nothing happening in our district for the last 6 to 10 years regarding student ministry. And so seeing that, plus seeing what I believe is a generational wave happening right now of people being called, people being saved in this next generation, that if we miss that, we're going to miss 10 to 30 years of ministry, shooting ourselves in the foot through apathy. So all that is what I'm feeling, sensing, going through, and I'm not alone. I mean, I'm hearing people talk in these meetings that we're in, and a lot of similar ideas that are happening. And so, given my background, my history, feeling that present urge and burden, I said, well, what can we do like right now? What can I put in my hands? What can I get a team around to do? And so what we're doing, and it's very non-strategic, it's very opportunistic more than anything else, is we started a cohort of no more than 5 people, age 16 to 20. We put out applications, senior pastors, youth leaders, and said, nominate people that are called. Now, we left that calling very generic because I do believe in marketplace ministry. I do believe in people becoming full-time ministers. But more than anything else, I think that's tough to decipher in that age 16 to 20. You just know that there's something deeper. Like if you've been saved, and some of us, we grew up in this, it was you got saved at camp. And if you were already saved and you felt calling deeper, you went over to door number 2, and that was full-time ministry. And so there's people that went to full-time ministry that were actually should have been full-time teachers and full-time lawyers and full-time all these other things that just should have been marketplace leaders as well. And so helping people decide that calling and understanding that they might not have it clear in that age range is what we're trying to be a bridge to right now. And so I'm taking the reins on it because I believe that you can't outsource some of these things right now. If you're wanting to change a paradigm, you want to change a culture of an organization, the leader really needs to be on the front lines of that. And so it's more of a like an Elon Musk surge over the next 2 to 3 years where I plan to really drill down on this. And part of it is because of some things that I went through in my life that have helped me. So what we're doing is we're doing a quarterly cohort with these 5 students. The first 3 are Zoom, and the last one at the end of the year is culminating in a retreat. But we're doing everything that a lot of other people have talked about. We're going through personality and temperament and spiritual gifts testing, all these things, giving them assignments. We're not trying to overload them with work. We're trying to overload them with self-discovery and self-awareness. And probably more than anything else is helping be a multiple anchor in their life in that pivotal time frame where teens are trying to either leave their home, discover themselves, discover life. We're just trying to come alongside and say, we also believe in you. And how can we connect you? And if it works out for the Shenandoah district, great. If it works out for another church, for the kingdom, that's ultimately what we want, is we want to see this happen. But we're starting very small because we know that we can kind of control that beta test rather than going very large with it. And so for the most part, that is what it is. I mean, some of you that have gone through a growth track or next steps or things like that is very similar to that. And this is very simple. It is doable. We're not, I mean, Michael Jordan's book list was amazing. We're not doing that. We're not doing that with 16 and 17-year-olds. We'll probably, the deepest we'll get is probably In the Name of Jesus by Henry Nouwen, which is just a great, packed book. But we're going to do the spiritual gifts test. We're going to do personality tests like DISC and, these other things, and help them clarify that burden and that calling, which I believe is just a different form of sanctification. We're just calling it calling these days. I really feel like it's just a different form of sanctification, and just helping them be kind of like the bumper lanes in bowling for these next 2 to 3 years as they go through this. And it could be a massive flop, but I just believe that we got to try something. And so I'm going to be stealing everything that everybody else has talked about. I got a whole notebook that from Ariana to Eddie. So anyway, that's where we're at right now. Trying to put money and resources behind it that are not budgeted. We're being very creative with it, but our district is pretty supportive of that. So that's what I got.
That group of 5, is that for 1 year, or does a 16-year-old that turns 17 stay on for the next year? Like, how does that work in terms of your cohorts?
Yeah, what the matriculation process is, we have asked them to commit to 1 year. We are open to seeing that grow. Ultimately, we'd love to see the baton pass to a SWU, an IWU, an OKWU, something like that. If they go, really, I'd like to target the juniors and seniors. Although we have 2 people that are 19 and 20 that their leaders are saying they're not going to college, they're taking a gap year, going to a trade school, and so we're focusing on them a little bit differently. But the whole thing is a baton handoff, and so if we have a 17-year-old, we can definitely see how that could go into a year 2, a year 3, and how they stack and build on each other. And we would for sure love for that to kind of be the Montessori style, where it comes back, where a 3rd year is helping mentor the first years through that process. We denied all of our 16-year-old applicants this year just because we had so many older applicants. And one of our caveats is you have to have a desire to be a part of it. And our older applicants, for whatever reason, had a real big desire to be a part of that. So yeah, the long and the short of that is yes and maybe, but if they don't want to be a part of it after a year, we're not having any more commitment after that.
Any other questions for Tim? What are you calling it, Tim? What's the name of the?
I don't have anything cool. We're just calling it the Future Leaders Cohort, and so yeah, that's it. Just Future Leaders Cohort right now.
Excellent. Well, it's great to see, like, as we gather as DYPs and district camp leaders, it's good to see vision from one of our DSs that is very specific, very clear around building students. And I know, I see your face, Nisha. I know what you're thinking. But
it's not specific and it's not clear. The burden is. The last thing I'll say is I don't want this to be a Shenandoah thing, and I definitely believe that there are other people in other districts that could be doing it better and probably more clear, more succinct. I would love to be a part. Like, this doesn't have to be a Shenandoah thing. This could be a, North Carolina East, West, Ohio, whatever. I would love for us to kind of have a cohort of these where we're across the country. Again, that we can be a bridge between the NTS camps and student camps all the way into the colleges and some of the programs that are happening there. I think we could be a good little baton passing entity for that.
Thank you, Tim. I know you have to run. Thank you so much for jumping on. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, we're gonna move to Cammie, representing Wesley Seminary. And I know my conversation with Yamil last week about this was just powerful, hearing a little bit of his heart. And I know I reached out to you, and this is a newer conversation with you about calling this group. So if there's anything you would want to share about Wesley Seminary, any calling initiatives, and introduce yourself. I think most people probably know you because you're all over the place with district conferences and other conferences, but introduce yourself and then share what is Wesley Seminary doing as it relates to calling.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Cami Malden, if you don't know me. Longest running staff member of Wesley Seminary right now. It's quite a title. Happy to be here. I am excited. I know this is kind of like a last minute jump in for me. And I'm a little jealous I'm not there in the room because I'm like looking at the owl and know so many of you. And so just really cool gathering, and I'm very jealous. But yeah, I have been here for over 10 years at Wesley Seminary. And as we've listened to like the other We5 schools talk about and Never the Same, and talk about how we're, helping young students, young people lean into their calling to ministry, I just was sitting here thinking, man, if Kern had been a thing when I was an IWU student, that would have been cool, but I didn't know I was called to ministry yet. I had no idea. I was a music major at Indiana Wesleyan, sang in chorale. I thought I was going to be like the next Carrie Job or something. And so I just didn't know. And it took me a little while to hear from adults and to hear from mentors who were like pouring into me to know, well, duh, like sometimes God just like thumps you on the head with information. I was like, yeah, duh, I'm called to ministry. And so, and that's how it is with us at Wesley Seminary. Not everybody is just exactly my story, but you guys know, you're sitting in the room. Not all of you who went through Wesley Seminary were called pre-high school or pre-college. And so for us to be able to have that experience of like, even from the initial conversation with a student, somebody who's maybe in their second career or just recently felt this calling, this nudge towards ministry, just getting to help people discern and just listening as they are like kind of processing all of this with them. So it's super fun. I mean, 10 years in admissions is a really long time. So I absolutely love it and love getting to do that. But as a whole, outside of the admissions process, we are, trying to implement the importance of calling into the curriculum that we're a part of as well. So like from the bookends of a program, our first class, Pastor, Church, and World, really helps us try to understand like what is a pastor, and helping the student wrap their mind about what that means. Like, what is a pastor? This is who we are. Getting a hold on calling and having a firm grasp on that as we get ready to move through a program that's going to take a lot of time and energy. So it's good to be reminded about our calling. And then things like calling gets revealed and gets clarified a lot for people through our programs. And some of you maybe have experienced that, some of our graduates I see in the room. But then at the other bookend of the programs, you have a capstone where you are like specifically developing these like personal ministry statements and ministry development plans that play a lot into calling as well. So it's a very different world when we're talking about calling at the seminary, because we're expecting that every student at Wesley Seminary is called to ministry. So that isn't necessarily the question for us. Like, you are called, and we're part of the equipping process. We're part of the obedience that you're feeling called to move forward and get more education, to just be better equipped for what that calling is that God has for you and God's asking you to move into. So it's definitely different, but we're excited just to help people discern and to gain clarity about that call, like while they're in the program.
Thank you, Cami. I'll reiterate, like last week when Emil, and some of you know, Collinger has transitioned, and Emil is the new interim for Wesley.
He's actually permanent.
He's permanent now. Yeah, very good. So praise God for that.
Yes.
Breaking news.
Great news. Love his heart, love just the way in which he approaches education and theological training.
Yeah.
And so as we were trying to dream, and a lot of this is early, so the idea of Wesley Seminary becoming a place that our students look to, not just our adults, is a part of that future vision. Like, what would it look like for middle schoolers and high schoolers to be aware of ways to plug in Wesley Seminary? So these are early conversations. He's very much a part a vision that sees that as a part of the training and equipping of students. So I'm excited that there was not a deer in the headlights look when I started talking about this. It was like, I've been hearing that too, kind of sense. God has been speaking to all of us about this. And I think it was Tim that mentioned like this wave of young leaders and people we're developing, that we are hitting one of those waves. And I'm not a surfer, but I've watched people surf. Like, you don't surf, but you know how to watch.
Yeah.
Right? Other people surf and fall. But one of the things I observed watching people surf is really good surfers know how to wave and recognize a wave. And I think people who are spiritually discerning right now will recognize a wave, and that this is something we can't miss. And so we have to prepare for what God is going to do in the midst of that wave. And so in some ways, the wave has already started. In other ways, it's just the beginning, if that makes sense. And so we get a chance to participate in it. So any questions for Cami, Wesley Seminary?
Yeah, if I could pick up on the wave.
Yeah.
Cami, is it now, Spanish language education is available from bachelor's all the way through doctorate by next year? Is that true?
That's the goal. Yeah. But we do have, we have the Master's of Divinity and a Doctor of Ministry. The Doctor of Ministry was new this year that launched, that was bilingual.
And it's also true that almost a quarter of your students, 100 and some, take their education that way. So it's a significant program, not just a little tack on it.
Yes, sir.
You know, 20% of the US population self-identifies as Hispanic right now. So that's huge in terms of the future. And so you're working still on adding a bachelor's in ministry. Any projection of when that will be in place?
I don't know the year. I mean, that is one of the things on the list. And so right now we're looking to hire, because Jamil officially is the new leader of the seminary. So we're hiring a director of our Spanish program. And I know if you guys know of anyone who might be a good fit for that role, we'll put that plug in. But once we have a director of the Spanish program, I think that's going to be one of the top priorities.
Like that number of people who identify as Latino, Latina, Hispanic is only going to grow. And to emphasize that it is not now because of immigration. It is because of birth rate. And that is a major significant difference. Yeah. That is no longer immigration, it's birth rate. Mm-hmm. That number does not change with immigration reform. It is going to be the new normal. So we as youth leaders, as educators, must be forward thinking and prepare for that. It is here in some spaces already, and it is coming to other spaces. So as the numbers of African Americans are plateaued or declining, the number of Hispanic and Latino is increasing. That's something we must be aware of. So yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah. Necesitamos hablar español.
Muchas gracias. Any other questions for Cami? Excellent. Thank you so much, Cami.
Thanks for letting me jump in.
Yeah, great to have you. So we're going to turn our attention to SWU and to Quest. Matt has been a part of us since yesterday. And I mentioned what a gift he has been just in terms of dreaming about this retreat. So pass it to you. I think most people know you because of the introductions yesterday. Maybe people may not know online. I think you know Cami and Ariana. So why don't you share about SWU and Quest and what you guys are doing?
Well, first I want to say it is an absolute privilege to be here. It's been cool to get to know some of you a lot better than I did beforehand, and just to hear your hearts come out. I know when you prayed last night, God ministered to me, in a deep way. And so I just want to thank you specifically for the way in which you're connected to Jesus and you shared that. Also, Kimmy was one of the first voices to recruit me to secondary ed, and I was pretty cynical about it, didn't want to do it, and Kimmy absorbed all that cynicism, and then pestered me to no end, and finally I did sign up. I just graduated with my MDiv from Wesley Seminary, and but genuinely, my experience during that MDiv process was one of the most formative experiences of my life, and enriched my life, my spiritual walk, my ministry, my understanding of who I am, who I'm called to be. So, free advertisement, Jamie, thanks for the commitment you gave me already to money on the table. That's great. Seriously, super grateful. So Quest is kind of a long story, but I'm gonna make it short. Quest is part of a grant funding process through Lilly Endowment. We experienced 2 cycles of that grant funding in 5-year segments. We are actually entering the 9th year, well, actually about to finish the 9th year. We have 1 more year left in our grant. And so we're in the fly it or land it phase. And a lot of that, whether or not it's gonna fly into something new or land, is out of our hands. But it's an exciting time because the key word for me is stewardship. And how do we steward this season we have next of what Quest is? For a long time, Quest was necessarily and understandably kind of SWU focused. And it was focused basically on bringing students to SWU, both short-term for enrollments and long-term for education, which makes a ton of sense. In the last few years, there's been a big pivot, and I'll tell you why. Quest grant is focused on 3 big ideas. It's calling discernment, which Kenny was talking about, not just saying you're called or are you called, yes or no, raise your hand, check a box, that's all very important. But it's more long-term, and how do we help the students discern their calling? How do we help them be equipped to discern their calling in community and on their own? The second piece is biblical engagement, which we think obviously goes hand in hand. How do you discern your calling if you don't understand scripture and the narrative and the story that God's telling? And then the third is cultural awareness. Again, I mean, Santis just mentioned it. Are we aware of what the culture of our own country, our own state, our own town, our own family, our own church really looks like? We think that calling discernment, biblical awareness, and cultural awareness all go together. They should go together. And all 3 of those things are pivotal for people entering a call to ministry or being pastors. To accomplish those things, eventually the people who are part of Quest started to realize the focus was a little narrow, and we were missing out on our understanding of our culture, which is as Wesleyans, deeply entrenched Wesleyans who believe in so many things the Wesleyan Church does. We were missing an opportunity that was culturally embedded, which is camps. We have, and to my knowledge, one of the best camp systems in the United States is Wesleyan, right? Whether it's district or it's NTS or it's Wesleyan adjacent camps that we're partnered with, camps every single summer result in life change. God shows up, people show up and respond. And so SWU's Quest program pivoted and said, actually, we're going to invest everything we're doing outside of SWU. Get off our own campus. Students may eventually show up, and that would be amazing. But if they never do, can we still add value to their experience of calling discernment, biblical engagement, and cultural awareness? And so we started actually raising up teachers and embedding them in camps. And that's been all over the map from a couple camps to start to this past summer. We had a record high of 13 camps, due in large part to Ariana and NTS, allowing us to be a part of NTS camp, 6 of them. We're super grateful and indebted to them. We got to be in front of a ton of students we wouldn't normally ever known or seen, Wesleyan and non-Wesleyan. But 13 different camps. We estimate about 1,000 students that we got to talk to amongst our 11 camp teachers. We have 800 contacts from them saying that they went through it. Most of them signed up to get a t-shirt more than anything, which we're totally fine with. We think calling discernment includes t-shirts sometimes, and I have some for each of you, by the way. So what we did though with those camps experiences, since that's the bulk of what we did, we tried to tackle what are the biggest opportunities and obstacles with camp experience and calling discernment. And the first is that we're not going to reinvent the wheel. Camps already know basically what you want to do and what you don't want to do. But we all know that camps usually have a segment of time or a burden that they don't quite know what to do with. That segment of time is often in the morning when everybody's tired and we're like, we can't teach the Bible in the morning. We're like, well, if you want us to, we'll give it a shot. And then also this burden of we've gotten our kids here, our youth pastors did everything to get them here. They're gonna be here working, counseling, whatever they're gonna do, and they're gonna go home. And we heard it mentioned earlier in the week. After you get home, it's like everything else comes in and just starts blah. And oftentimes, big decisions and calling conversations are ones you've had a bunch with your students, but you might need one more voice, one more person to have that conversation again. And say what you've already said, whether you're a youth pastor or a parent, we both know the same thing. You can say it 100 times, someone else says it once. You may say, did you know? And you're like, oh, yeah, good.
Region.
Yeah, good job, that's awesome. So we want to have that conversation. Maybe you have had it 100 times, maybe you haven't. Maybe you haven't been able to with a certain student because you just don't click, or they've never showed up to campus the first time they've ever been a part of your youth ministry. We want to have that conversation with students. So how that works is we saw a couple obstacles to that. One, language is all over the place. And we heard it mentioned earlier in the week. I almost had to do an exercise, but I think it would have taken a while of concentration. Where I was going to have you write down what is a pastor as quickly as you can and give you very little time to do it. And then what should a called student do next? And give you very little time to do it. Because those are the experiences I've had with students when they're like, I think I'm called to be a pastor. What's a pastor? And you're like on the spot in a hallway. You're like, okay, well, I have the Wesleyan discipline here. Nobody knows that. Or I feel called to ministry, what should I do next? And the panic that happens there isn't because you don't know. It's because how do you synthesize all of that into a single conversation in 30 seconds? And part of the obstacle there is language. And so we started, but it's not done yet, but we started with our teachers sitting and kind of having this like, how can we hive mind this and start to talk about language in a way that makes sense to us, fits in our culture, is biblical, and helps students discern calling? So one of the things we did is we sat down and we talked through what expressions of calling could there be, and how can we shape our language and our curriculum, and then express that at camps. And so one of the things we did is as a group, we committed to say, we believe calling can be expressed, trained up, whatever you want to say, at least 4 ways. And Pastor Wayne, you said this earlier yesterday, we think every student has a calling. And we believe wholeheartedly in that. But how do we start the conversation with every student about that calling? So we said there's 4 things we need to talk about first. That is, 1, every single person is called to know and love Jesus. And if you look in scripture, that's always a calling. People are always invited to be next to, be near with, follow, go home with, whatever it is, be with Jesus. We think every student is also called to serve other people, right? The first greatest commandment is this, the second is like it. And then we think the third call that every student has in their life is fully surrender, to fully surrender to Jesus. And Tim mentioned sanctification, that's it. It's being fully sanctified. And then the fourth call is to serve the local and global church. We think every single person is called to all those things, whether they know it or not, all the time or not. We think they are. And we also think every pastor should probably do a refresh on all those on a regular basis, right? I know as a minister myself, I had to go back and read up on some of those continuing ed credits and knowing and loving Jesus and serving other people and being surrendered and serving the local and global church. But we wanted students to have a handle on how to start talking about that. And so our Quest leaders go into a classroom setting on camp, in camp situations, and we start to talk about those 4 areas of calling. And we start to help our students try to identify, where are you at? You feel like you can check the box on a couple of those? You feel like maybe God's talking to you about one of those? Where's the one that you just don't connect with yet? And out of that will definitely come some conversations about full-time vocational calling for a lifetime. But out of that will also come some conversations about calling to go back and lead a CYC ministry at school. And we believe that that's part of our burden in stewardship, is to start that conversation with students or continue it for a place where they're at. One of the burdens we had, an obstacle and opportunity both, is that we wanted our curriculum to be really, really good, but not complicated, and it needed to take students further into the actual goal. So biblical engagement is our primary goal with the curriculum. So we kept it simple, and literally my job is curriculum writing. I know how to make it complicated. Part of why I get paid sometimes is to make it complicated. I don't know why. Why are we doing this? Let's make it simple. If you open this book, this is the Quest student book. I have a couple copies for you. It's not complicated. Don't be expecting something super impressive. We kept it really, really simple because we want students to have biblical literacy. And we started really simply with 3 biblical characters, and I call them characters, we know they're people, right? But I actually framed them as characters in almost a graphic novel style, so that students would open this up and see something that looks kind of familiar to them. This is not what Stephen the Martyr looked like, but it could be. We used an AI program, plugged his information in and thought, hey, let's figure out what he might have looked like. And culturally, regionally, age-wise, he might have looked like this, I don't know. And then we used scripture to do a little bit of a background on his setting. Where was Stephen living, what was going on in his culture, what was happening in history, what were some of the pressures, and what were some of his key points of experience. We did a bio, we did a key contribution, and then we did what we called Stephen's calling journey. We talked about what the Bible says about Stephen. We gave them actual sections of scripture that they would read together and read by themselves. We gave them questions to discern what's going on in this moment. And we used the Discovery Bible method as a framework. If you're familiar with that, it's super, super easy. And at the end, we had them take notes and share those things, and our teachers were tasked with helping students walk through this in whatever setting makes sense on their camp. When we built all of that, we gave our teachers a chance to fill out their own calling journey, and then we gave students a chance to start filling in and drafting. No pressure, no like you have to have it all figured out all at once, but just a chance to start drafting based on the model they saw in a biblical character. What are some of the settings? Where am I from? What are the people like around me? What's my family like? What have I experienced? What's my backstory and bio? What are some of the things that have been a part of my calling journey to this point? And what do I think that might point towards? What are some of the challenges? And we try to help them by the end of the week, hopefully, draft up a little bit of their calling journey. And so the curriculum is this. The challenge we gave to our teachers, and I mentioned this to a couple of you, is if your camp has to cancel your Quest track and your curriculum somehow catches on fire and your t-shirts burn somewhere as well on your way to the camp, what if by the end of camp, all of that is gone? Could we still say that people at that camp, students at the camp, pastors at the camp, camp directors, walk away with a clear understanding of Jesus and a better understanding of calling discernment, biblical engagement, and cultural awareness? And so hopefully those are the people we sent to your camp. We tried really hard. I think they were beautiful people. Stephen was one of them. So we hope we sent those people to your camp, but that's our goal. And so I'm saying this as information, but also as a request. If you know somebody or you yourself are a person that believes you can show up to a camp and help us do that, please let me know. We're recruiting for this next summer already to send out people to camps. If your camps are interested in having Quest show up, we don't do everything. You heard a bunch of people say so many amazing things they do. We don't do most of those things. We do this. And our goal is, yes, definitely to get people to come to SWU and study religion. We would love that to happen. And Mike Tapper, if he were here, would want to hear that part of it, so I said that. But his heart is also everything else we just talked about. We want students, whether they ever show up to SWU or not, to have an experience where they get to actually discern their calling, whatever that looks like. And we want to be able to have that conversation in a productive way. One of my favorite stories from this summer happened with one of my dear friends, Cheyenne Bales. You know Cheyenne, she is an absolute wild person. She's from the Low Country near Charleston. Came to Christ in a beautiful way and has just spent the last 10 years of her life discipling people. That's just all she does. And she sends more people, I think, ratio-wise to Southern Weston's DOR department than anybody I've ever met. And they are fundamentally just discipled, Jesus-loving people. And so she just lives it. And so we recruited her to come and teach, and she was at SWU for an NTS camp class. And she was looking at those 4 callings, and she was praying through the class that day. It was day 2. Word got around or something happened and a bunch of people showed up. More people than she had room for in the class. It was packed. She was nervous. And as she was talking, she started her whole spiel. And she was supposed to be moving into like vocational college. And she felt this check in her spirit. She said, "Matt, I'm so sorry if I messed this up, but I felt like we couldn't go any further until we talked about loving and following Jesus." She said, "So I just gave a straight up gospel presentation." And she said, and then I was shocked because 11 students responded to Christ for the first time in that room. And I thought we were going to talk about vocational ministry, and instead we were just talking about salvation. And I was like, Cheyenne, you didn't mess up. You did exactly what you should have done, because it's exactly where we're supposed to be, is discern that calling. And so I don't know what that's going to look like in every room. Every camp is different. Every teacher is different. We try to contextualize it so that the conversations match the camp, match the students, work well to serve your camp. But our heart is that kind of thing, whether it's a first-time decision for Christ, or it's that surrender, or it's a call to ministry, we want that to happen like our camp. So we want to be a part of that. We love being a part of that. I just talked a lot. I get excited about this. Let me see if I missed anything. Oh man. No, we're good. Any questions?
Any questions for Matt? I saw him.
Yeah, so we've been able to, Pennyworth has been able to work with you guys, past well, Michaela came, she was our camp speaker 3 years ago. Gonna be our camp speaker this upcoming year. And I've never, because you guys are technically like a parachurch, right? Kind of?
It's sort of, it's grant funded, it's not even really a ministry of itself.
Okay.
Blue is the grant, yeah.
Either way, like the work that you guys put in, it has to be a lot because you make it look so easy. Everything's been like smoothed over and, we had so many students respond so well to Caleb and the other folks that you guys had come through. Where you got, like, I don't know, it was, if you're wanting to even like set a precedent in your camp setting or like a long-term, sort of level up in your camp speakers, like get a hold of these guys because it's gonna happen. And every year after that, like we kind of get like better speakers almost, you know, so to have you guys come back and the leaders too be encouraged in hearing what you guys are doing. It's just like, it almost sounds, it feels kind of too good to be true sometimes. But it's happening like in real time in front of us. And thank you for putting in that work because we needed it even as leaders too. So I really did it. You guys, I didn't even go to school.
Secret, I have to confess, I didn't go to school either. I didn't know
We all family, we all.
Oh, yeah, I didn't have to, I did. One thing I will say is, we had a camp, and I love this, it was actually one of the camps here, Chris Meitzel, he's brutally honest, and I love it, but he just said, Matt, I'll be honest with you, like, West is great, but my goal is that we get a free additional camp speaker every week when you guys come. So we pay our camp speaker for night, and then you all pay our camp speaker in the morning. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly right. We send a free camp speaker to you, and they're high caliber, high quality. Sometimes they're the same speaker that you wanted for your camp. What's that?
I'll take two.
They're a big, they're going off.
You still gotta pay the night.
That's right. You have to pay one.
You guys still pay the night? Oh. Only one comes from.
Never mind.
Any other questions for Matt?
Oh, I did have a question on that. Sorry, I forgot. How far are you guys willing to like send your speakers? Like, do you go from coast to coast, north to south? Like,
Yeah. Yes, we are willing to go just about anywhere. We went Oklahoma, Iowa, New York, South Carolina, Indiana, just about anywhere that someone has a legit reason for us to go, we'll find a way to go there.
And you cover their expenses for them to get there and back, or does the camp cover?
We cover their expenses. A couple of our camps helped out with housing and food, but a lot of times we'll do that as well. It kind of depends on the camp and where they're at, where they have a need for it. But our goal is to cover everything.
One thing.
Any other questions for Matt about Quest? Excellent. I hope we're at 11:25. We're going to break in about 5 minutes. I hope. I think Tim, you said it yesterday. There's this collective. I used the word force. Collective might. That sounds so much better. I felt like I was going into my Star Wars days. There's this collective might of the church that I think often we don't leverage well. And, or we could leverage better. Maybe it's a better way to say it. And our hope, and the reason why we want you to hear, and you didn't hear from everyone, Kingswood, if you don't know, Jeremy McDonald is the student ministry director at Kingswood and wanted to be a part of this and couldn't. But we'll get him hyped in and you'll hear what Kingswood is doing. But we wanted you to hear from all of our universities and our seminary to have this collective view, this macro view of what is being done, right? As we dream about our camps, as we dream about our churches, as we dream about conferences, that from NTS to Follow to Quest to, whatever it may be, that there's a common strand. Like, we don't all do the same thing, but all of us do something well, and we're connected, right? That all of us do something well. We need to know what that is. We need to learn from each other. Sometimes we learn in order to replicate, but sometimes we learn to realize, you know what, I shouldn't be doing this. We should be partnering with you, right? And so those are the kind of things we wanted to kind of emerge as you listen. And I've been in spaces listening to all of these over the last 6 months, but even in this room, listening to them again, like there's so much that's come up, even in the last hour and a half, 2 hours. So that was part of the goal of this morning, is to hear that. Part of our goal this afternoon is to determine what to do with that, right? What to do with that collective light, and begin to process how we handle commitments, how we handle decisions. And then I want to share with you this idea of creating and curating a platform around calling that has all these pieces tied into in some way, some shape or some form. So that's kind of where we're going. So thank you to those who joined us online. You're more than welcome to stay on or jump back on at 1:30 when we have our afternoon session, but if you can't, we totally understand. We appreciate you jumping in and being a part of this. Go ahead, Ariana.
I just say again, yeah, I really wanted to be in that room. So thank you for allowing me to join in this way. But one thing too, that just as we keep talking through this, and I mean, my heart, my passion for youth ministry is stronger than it's ever been 30 years in. But this summer, past couple of summers, we've also prayed over our pastors and our adult leaders that God would reaffirm their calling in the ministry. And I think I don't know if that's something that you've talked about, but if that's something that stirs some conversations there, that, once we accepted the call to ministry, life has been really hard. COVID has been really hard. Things have been very difficult. And there have been a lot of people that have stepped away and a lot of people that have walked away. And boy, what we can do as leaders to just keep encouraging the youth pastors and keep encouraging the youth leaders that show up every week at their churches that don't get paid to continue to pour into these students. What that does for the church is so huge. And that's someththat I think that we can all collectively do as well, that those youth pastors are just hanging in by a thread, that through a conversation, through an event that we do, through whatever, that they walk away from what we have been able to encourage them with, with the renewing of, yeah, God called me, that's why he did. And I'm going to stick with it. This is going to be lifetime. And I think that that's so good. Our heart and our prayer is that students would love Jesus and love the church and those things, because we talk about the students are the church of today, but they're also the church of tomorrow. And if we don't grasp that with them, we don't want empty churches in 20 years. We want them fuller and alive than they've ever been. So thank you again for all you guys do. Thank you, Santis.
Yeah, thank you. Ariana, would you be willing to close us in prayer, just kind of praying over everything that we just talked about, and that there would be that spirit of unity and clarity and collaboration as we move forward?
So I would love to be honored. Thank you. God, I thank you for each and every person that you have brought to this conversation that you have here. God, I thank you for their yes to your call in their life. God, I thank you for their passion for next generation. God, I thank you for where you've asked them to go and where they've been. God, I pray blessing and favor over the next conversations. And God, for all the things that have been talked about over this time, God, I pray that you would continue to stir excitement and stir passion in each one of these leaders. God, I thank you for Santis. I thank you for his leadership. God, I pray that you would continue to give him dreams and visions of what things could look like in the future. God, I thank you for Pastor Wayne. I thank you for his leadership. God, I pray a fresh anointing over him and his leadership and what he represents and what he brings to your church. God, I thank you for each and every one of the leaders around that table and that has been on this Zoom. God, I pray that you would just ignite in us a new passion for your kingdom, that you ignite in us a new passion for this generation. God, that you would give us things that only we can do, that we look to you and say, God, work through us, move us. But God, through that, I pray unity. God, I pray that we would all be working for the same cause, and that's for your kingdom's sake. God, we bless you today and we thank you. We thank you for the invitation to be invited to be in ministry. We thank you that you asked us to be a part of this. We're humbled by that. And God, I pray that we would all give you everything that we have and give you our all so that your work can be done through us in the way that you've planned before time. And we praise you for that in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for being on. It's a joy to have you. All right, so we're at 11:30, and we intentionally put an hour in at this point for you to. Some of you kind of have to kind of check out of your rooms and kind of get your stuff together there. Others just need to have some time where you're not immersed into an intense conversation. But lunch will be here at. We'll have time to eat. We may actually start the session early so that we can end earlier. So we'll eat at 12:30, transition into our last session. But before you leave for the break, we want to take a picture, a group picture. A few folks have to head out around this time. And this moment in time. Is that all right? Can we do that?
Yes, sir.
So Priscilla's going to coordinate